We got tapped by the Beach Boys, the actual Beach Boys, to do a Beach Boys product, a spring reverb tank. Most people haven't heard of full frequency Germanium gain stage.
Well, obviously we've got here loads of delay and fuzz now, haven't we?
Hey everyone, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here.
Chris here.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Chris Benson has joined us here today from Benson amplifiers and pedals and audio and all the good stuff. I've been enjoying the fruits of your wares for a long time, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So thanks for coming out.
Yeah, my pleasure. Very happy to be here.
What brings you to the UK?
So this product, which I think is going to release in about an hour, we got tapped by the Beach Boys, the actual Beach Boys, to do a Beach Boys kind of. It's in conjunction with the documentary that's coming out.
Right.
To do a Beach Boys product, a spring reverb tank.
Oh wow!
About a year ago. So I started designing it a year ago, and now we've made 66 of them, and they're going to be sold through Sweetwater.
Right.
Hopefully pretty quickly.
And it has an optical tremolo in it as well, you were saying.
Yes, it has an optical tremolo. But they had a Beach Boys event at Abbey Road Studios last night, and other than wanting to make the product, a major incentive was, hey, we're going to do the release at Abbey Road. It's like, okay, that sounds great. Studio 2. You can bring your friends. So, yeah, that's why I'm in town.
That's too cool. We'll talk a little bit about studio and recording and all of that as we get going. We haven't said it yet, but please subscribe, click the button. It really does help to do that. Helps us out on That Pedal Show. Forgive us if you told this story elsewhere, Chris, but perhaps you could just fill us in on trajectory to here. So I know you're a massive fan of recording, clearly a fan of electronics and amplifiers. How did you get started in this business?
I quit smoking in 2007, and I had a bunch of nervous energy and no job at the time. And around that time I was playing in a band, and I had this experience where I went to some random rehearsal spot, plugged my bass, because I'm primarily a bass player, into a Fender Bassman, a lot like the silver one.
Yeah.
Back there, and I had been playing solid state stuff, and I fell in love. I mean, it was like a 3-dimensional sound, not something that I had really noticed before, but it felt so much more like an instrument than the stuff I had been using. It was like, I need this. I don't have any money, but I bet I could figure it out because I'm kind of a handy guy, as a carpenter, and just can figure, stuff like that out. Mm-hmm. And so I started doing a bunch of research, and I think about 3 months later, I had a working amp. I just bought the components and stuck it together and didn't really know how to bias it or anything. And miraculously, it worked. And so that's what kind of got me into it. And then I started wondering, well, this sounds different than that Bassman that I had played in that rehearsal space. I wonder why. So it kind of became this inquiry project. Why do these sound different?
Right.
And it kind of went from there. I started working for a friend of mine, Ben Verellen, who has his own line of amplifiers, and he hired me. And before long, I was a repair tech at Varellin Amps, and working hand in glove with Ben Varellin. And he's an actual electrical engineer, and I didn't really have any, background in that stuff. But he kind of like gave me the basics, and these are all the analog. Here's all the analog theory you need to know. And I worked with Ben for 3 years, and as a tinkerer, started making my own original circuits based on stuff that I was repairing, like a Mesa or, an old Supra would come in, and I would, well, why does that sound the way it does?
Right.
So I'd take a circuit block and put it in this old chassis that I'd been kind of working on, and kept kind of tweaking it, trying stuff out, and eventually I had the Monarch, and showed it to my friend Dan Phelps, and he was like, "Dude, this is really special. Like, this is really cool." And he kind of hooked me up with another friend of his, who was an entrepreneur, and that they were like, "You should start an amp company." And so that's kind of how the business started.
Right.
And then I was like, well, I need other products. I can't just have one amp. So made a reverb unit. I made a bass amp called the Gnostic, and, started my garage, and that took about 10 years, but now I have 20 employees working in Portland, Oregon,
That's amazing.
making amps and pedals.
So from 2008 to the point Benson arrived as a brand. When did Benson arrive as a brand?
2012.
2012. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's quick then.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man.
Yep, incorporated in 2012.
I think that's how people assume it happens, but you talk to other guys who have learned a bit of electronics and they're still 25 years down the line. But
it happened quick. I mean, I was also in the industry at that point. I was a repair tech. We moved to Portland. I worked at this vintage guitar shop, Old Town Music, and
yeah.
I mean, that I was working there while I was building amps at night. So,
Wow. That is a common story, isn't it?
but that allowed me to make a bunch of connections.
Sure.
And I already knew a bunch of artists, and, my friends started getting big and taking the amps out on tour with like the Shins and Head on the Heart and Decemberist and stuff. So
There seems to be a lot going on in Oregon.
mm-hmm.
There's a lot of
Yep.
very cool companies and artists and stuff.
Yeah, it rains a lot, and it drives everyone inside,
Right,
and everyone's just working on their own kind of projects.
right.
And there's tons of gear companies in Portland.
Were you playing, at what level were you playing before all of this? Were you out gigging and doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing in bands, not just for fun since I was 18. And yeah, that was kind of my whole thing. I was a musician. Even, I still play in bands. So nothing like too crazy, no major label stuff, but, local bands.
Yeah, doing a thing. And I think we were texting just before you arrived, and you said you were doing backline somewhere. Does that mean you were supplying backline somewhere?
Yeah, that's not a normal part of the business, but
Right.
when Pearl Jam or Matt Cameron specifically calls you and wants to backline his band at an arena, you say, yeah.
You say yes. Cool, man. So let's have a listen to a few things. We've got one new product on here that we'll come to in a bit. I think the first Benson product that we got to grips with was the Preamp.
Yeah.
And actually, via Rift City, we ended up doing some orange ones
We did.
as a special edition. It's okay, mate.
They do.
They do repair.
They do.
Yeah.
And as if by magic, so we loved this thing so much that we did
It was via Joe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
At Rift City. So anyway, as you can see, same as that one there, but different colour. And that was the first kind of touch point we'd had with your stuff. Let's start there and listen to this, because Dan and I were playing this before we started filming and both got very excited.
Oh.
What's the difference, Chris, just before we hear it?
Between those two?
Yeah.
Okay, so the light green one, mint, I guess, is the one that we released a month ago, a couple months.
Yeah.
And that actually has, well, I'll start with the gray one. The gray one is the preamp that is in my amplifiers. I just kind of transposed it from the amps to JFETs. So
Right.
amp in the box. I've always loved amp in the boxes. Like Box of Rock was on my board for a long time. So it's just the preamp and my amp. So designing it took about 45 minutes of my time. I never expected the pedals to take off. I was like, oh, we'll make 200 of these.
Right.
Or also might have spent a little bit more time on the design. That being said, I'm still extremely happy with how it turned out.
Yeah.
So that's all JFET transistors. And then, I designed the Germanium boost, which is like the servo biased Germanium kind of clean boost. And that has its own, pretty unique sound, in my opinion. It's like most people haven't heard a full frequency Germanium gain stage. And I just stuck that boost into the front end of the preamp instead of, the first JFET stage.
Right.
And that's the Germanium preamp. And they do sound pretty different, I think.
When you say most people haven't heard of full frequency Germanium boost, do you mean because most of them end up either as fuzzes or treble boosters?
Yeah, I mean, they're impossible to bias, center bias with any sort of consistency. So part of the, what I did was I made a sensor circuit that kind of senses the bias and adjusts the bias so it's always,
Bang in the middle.
right in the middle, just pinned, the entire time. And then I also put like a buffer in the front end, so you have like high input impedance, because that's another thing. Like Germanium, actually all BJT transistors will roll off bass frequencies if you just run a guitar into it, which is the it's the impedance issue. So that has like the buffer and then the Germanium transistor, and that's it. But since no one has really done that. It's like a naked Germanium gain stage. That's full frequency, 20 hertz to 20K.
Come on then, Daniel. We'll start with the preamp, which we are somewhat familiar with.
Okay.
And we'll just have a quick listen to each, and then that'll tell us where we are, right?
Sure. Come on. That's lovely.
Honest is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
For me, it's like strong. I've been using the term strong a lot for guitar sounds recently, and that comes to give context for that comes off the back of running too much gain and everything starting to sound thin and weak. And that is, strong and confident, and you want to be in control when you're playing that, right?
Yeah. The attack is different from the Germanium preamp to the standard preamp.
Yeah.
Noticeably so. The Germanium has the edges aren't as sharp, and because of that, it feels like butter to play. It's so I don't know. It's very cool.
Really killer. What about a question I always have for pedals like this, because a lot of people use them as always-on devices. I think just to, if your amp sounds a little lackluster, not that these two do today, but if your amp sounds a little lackluster or you just want to get a bit more interest, I've seen so many people run the preamp as an always-on device. And then the next question is cleanup.
Right.
So where are we in that respect? I was going to
Grab your Stratoblaster.
Yeah. It kind of reacts exactly as I would expect an amp to react.
Right.
So a little bit. It doesn't like, with some, you if it's really heavily buffered and you turn the Strat down, it gets bright.
Yeah.
Like it does on a Fuzz sometimes. It doesn't do that, just backs off really nice.
Yeah.
Killer, man.
When we saw the Fuzz, which was
we got the hairdryer out for the Fuzz, do you remember?
That was
great.
That was hilarious.
I really enjoyed that.
Now, you've taken the same temperature controlled idea and put it into the Stonk Box, which is your take on a Mark 1.
Yes.
Take us through the heat thing and why it's a problem, and then the idea of putting it into a Mark 1, which, let me get this right. The Mark 1 is a 3-transistor fuzz, and the first transistor is acting as a buffer. So does that not solve that problem? I'm assuming because they're all still germanium transistors and they're all still all over the place.
The first one's not, because it's just a buffer.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be germanium.
Right, okay.
Some people will argue with that, but it's my pedal.
Nice.
Yeah, so the germanium is famously sensitive to temperature. If it shifts 10 degrees, you guys Celsius over here?
Yeah.
Well, we can
I
translate.
can't. No, I can't Celsius. Otherwise, it's plus 21, minus 3, and spin around on your head. I can't work out Fahrenheit to save myself. So yeah.
So temperature shifts, and that shifts the bias point of a germanium transistor. Now, the bias point determines how it clips.
Right.
If it's symmetrically clipping, you get a lot more like odd order harmonic distortion. If it's asymmetrical, you get a lot more even. So it actually has a lot to do with how things sound.
Sure.
And a lot of germanium pedals sound completely different.
And how much shift is required to change the sound of a germanium fuzz?
Very little.
Yeah.
I mean, you shift that bias half a volt and it sounds completely different.
Right.
So that really bothered me. This is even before I had my company. I was, I think I cloned like a ZVEX Fuzz Factory, which is a brilliant design. And that's when I noticed the temperature variation thing. I was like, man, if there was a way just to keep these transistors at a common temperature, that would be solved. Fast forward to COVID, which is full 12 years later. Yeah. We decided, we were having a lot of trouble making amps, getting parts. You had no idea if we were even going to be able to see each other as a shop, And so I was like, well, we got to make more pedals to stay in business. Got to feed the kids. So I had recently seen like a solid state thermostat schematic, which is, it just has a temperature sensor chip and a comparator. And that got me thinking, I could use that comparator to turn something on and off. And so, yeah, I made a circuit that senses the bias of a transistor, and then that circuit turns a heater on and off, which is essentially just a resistor. And you pass current through a resistor that's spec'd too low, and it heats up.
Right.
So I used some thermal grease to heat sink that resistor to the transistors. And so if the bias needs to shift, it starts passing current through it, heats up the transistor until it gets back to the correct bias, and then shuts off.
Right.
And so, it takes three or 4 minutes for it to fully heat up, depending
Right.
on the ambient temperature. And that's how that was born.
That is amazing.
And you can see that it's working because we're going from a red to green LED, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, the green LED, the comparator drives the LED too. So when the heater's on, it's amber. And when it's off, it's green. Just in case people are curious
Okay,
about
so that's
what's
just turned
happening.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's very cool. Well, I want to play the Stonk Box for a second because I'm very excited about this. I've always loved the Mark I design. It's notoriously tricky,
Yep.
that design.
Makes it a perfect candidate for the thermal bias
Right.
because it biases itself with leakage, and the thermal bias actually induces leakage. So if you can control the leakage, you can control the bias.
Okay.
We should just explain that when we turn the filter knob, it will make a crackling sound.
Yes.
And that's because it should.
Yes, that's part of the. I didn't want to take away that feature of the Mark I.
Right.
That's So
'Cause
crackle okay,
It's supposed
as
to
they
do
say.
It's a good one.
It's
a good one.
I promise you, I'm not just saying this because you're here. If you want a pedal that doesn't give you all the problems that a fuzz gives you in terms of farsing out on the bottom end, impossible to control off the volume control, and you want the perfect step between a great distortion and a great fuzz, buy that.
Yeah.
That sounds, and I can hear from what he's playing, I can hear that's doing the do.
It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Well done. That's awesome.
The funny thing is, you can't get an original Mark I. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just
Yeah,
on
yeah.
titanium. So I had no idea what the thing was supposed to sound like when I was designing it. And then I had my pal David Torn, who's a Mark I freak. He's just been obsessed with that pedal forever. He sent me probably 10 different Mark I variants
Right.
that people always send them to him. And
Like original ones.
no,
No, yeah,
no one has
made
them.
10.
but it was just like, it's a popular pedal for builders.
Sure.
And I put it up against those, and I was like, okay, this works.
Yeah.
How much variance was there in the ones you've got sent?
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with the bias is going to be all over the place. There's really no escaping that
Yeah.
unless you control it somehow.
And of course, Stonk is a reference to Zonk, I guess,
Yeah.
in a way,
Yep.
given that some of those Mark I's ended up with a variation as zonk machines, some of which had a tiny bit of octave in them. Has that got any of that?
I haven't actually coaxed much octave out of it.
Yeah, some do and some don't, I think, with zonks.
It depends on how it's biased.
Yeah.
You know, the more second, the more even order harmonic distortion, the more of those overtones build up.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
Killer. And
Well done, mate. That's awesome.
What's the filter actually doing?
the filter is the original control, and that changes the bias of the second transistor and also the low frequency filtering.
Right.
So, two different things. And there's DC on it, which is why it crackles.
Right.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that because if you change it, it changes, right? Something else changes.
Yep.
In the design of it. Killer. Let's hear that next to the Germanium fuzz then, and maybe this will be, for those of you interested, this will be a good comparator of if you're thinking about a Germanium fuzz or something more like a Mark 1 type thing. Chris, do you want to play?
Oh no, I'm all shaky. I've been traveling.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
You sure? I
Yeah. Maybe in a bit.
don't want to seem rude to be sat here doing
No,
all the
you guys are way better.
doing all the fun
at
parts,
guitars,
you know. Okay. You know what, Dan? This would be so much better in E flat.
Okay. All right. I like that.
Okay, now we're talking. Sorry for blasting you with that.
Love it. Sounds great.
Just for the record, these amps are set pretty clean, right?
I wonder what the settings are.
So the deluxe reverb is on its happy place of 4.5, so it will just go into overdrive. The bell ringer, which we will hear a bit more of in a minute, is on 3, is on 3 in its 35 watt setting. So neither of those fuzzes was hitting a heavily overdriving amp, and that was a joy. Both of them are joy to play. And again, I'm not just saying that because you're sat there.
Very cool. I want to have a look at the delay because I haven't seen this yet. I've had a small play, but you showed me a couple of really cool things. When did you think, you know what we need? We need a delay pedal.
I'm a delay nut.
Right.
I used to service tape echoes for fun.
Oh, man.
Like that, but in around 2007, 2008, I was just really stressed out from having a business. And I started taking tape echoes in, echoplexes mostly to repair, and I just enjoyed dialing them in. And that's one of two pedals I use live when I play out. So delay is really important to me. I wanted to do an analog delay. And I was working with my friend Jack DeVille on it, I think around when COVID hit. And he kind of like put together the bones of something. And then it's like, yeah, this doesn't sound quite right to me. I'm insanely picky about delay. And Jack didn't have time to really chase it down, which is fair. You know, he was dealing with the same kind of thing. So I got a version of an analog delay, actually a couple versions of analog delays that sounded really good to my ears. Like I really enjoyed them. And then I couldn't get the chips that I wanted anymore. I have a preference for the Cool Audio chips, which are considered not as good as the X5, but they sounded better to me even if they were a little noisier. So fast forward a couple years and I revisit the delay project. And I, just for fun, I dropped a PT2399, which is a digital, very, very primitive, I would say, digital chip.
And ubiquitous as well. It's in a lot of things, isn't it?
Yep. Dropped that into the circuit that I designed for this analog delay. It's like, oh, this is really cool. Because with all the delay stuff, the things that you have to get clock noise out of analog delays, that played very well with the PT2399 once they gain staged it properly, which is different than the analog chips. I was like, this is great. I'm getting 1250 milliseconds out of one chip, which is unheard of.
Right.
I mean, it didn't sound all garbled. So it's like, well, we're just going to do that. And, you know, it might be a harder sell as a PT2399, but it sounds like a freaking analog delay.
Right.
So, and then I worked with a couple buds, Antoine Rico of Electric Canary and Octave Zangs, and they helped me incorporate tap tempo into it because I don't know how to program anything. I just know how to make things sound good, arguably. So that's the story of the delay.
Awesome.
Yep. And that was, you know, years in the making. You know, I started working on that in 2008.
Wow.
Some of the, when I watched some of the demos, there are some sounds that I wasn't immediately expecting from an analog delay. So maybe we would start with what we expect from a traditional analog delay and then go on from there.
Sure. You want me to,
drive?
Please.
That's a pretty good starting point, probably.
You should be on, sir. You should be on.
Oh, I'm on.
You're on.
Oh, I'm playing. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to have a play of this. Isn't that great?
I'm hearing a record.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing is a record.
Yeah.
Like I'm hearing like a Casey Musgraves record or something of that ilk.
Thank you.
Killer. Sorry, Dan, I totally interrupted you.
No. Yeah, okay. I just... That's a lot of fun. I'm just going to dial it back a bit and just get some less.
I was trying to find that place that you like where it just goes into oscillation.
Yeah, I'm just going to get a cleaner. Yeah, give me 2 seconds. Just have a quick play. That feedback is wild. And does it go 100% wet?
Yep.
So now if I go wet dry. That is a really killer sounding delay.
I have a question. What's the shortest delay, Chris?
About 30 milliseconds.
Right.
So
Daniel?
I think I know what's about to happen.
Oh, hang on. Okay.
No, hang on. Wait.
No, wait.
Wait.
Stop it! Wait. Stick a fork in me, I'm done.
Sorry,
that is wild.
Just explain what happened.
So, because you can do 100% wet on this delay, I'm sending the delay into one amp and not the other. So, you've got the stonk machine going into both, but the wet delay is only going into one. So you get this doubling effect. And that's just magic.
And I added some modulation to give it a chorusy type vibe. And then with the really short delay times, you get into almost flangey world.
That's really cool.
Sorry, so, Chris is there going, I know this.
There's some other really cool features that you've got in there because you can change the waveform.
Mm-hmm.
So just take us through that briefly,
Sure.
because that's really, really cool.
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of menu diving.
Right.
Sorry.
Hello.
I'm right with you.
But I did want other LFOs.
Sure.
So you can and I wanted to be able to access them without having to bend over.
Right.
So this might take a little kind of balance, but if you hold this down
Mm-hmm.
and then press the right button, it goes into a menu, and that the one blip there is sine wave, 2 is square wave,
Right.
and then 3 is random.
Okay, have to hit a random.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so to get out of that menu, while we're here, this is tap divisions, but that's less fun.
Right.
Oh, wow. So what are our divisions? Quarter note?
Yeah, quarter note, dotted eighth, and 16th.
Fantastic. Cool.
So, all right. So, yeah, try that out.
Was that maximum repeats when you press and hold?
Yeah.
Yeah, very.
So I
very
just
cool.
I hit a chord. Just do that for us.
It interacts with the feedback knob, so there is a place right around here where I think it'll actually run away.
Oh, mate, that's awesome.
That's really killer. When I said earlier, I'm hearing a record, that you might think that very sort of heavily modulated sound is kind of odd and weird, but listen to some contemporary releases by people like Casey Musgraves, by people like Sarah Jarosz. Listen to the keys, right? One thing I'm hearing all over a lot of contemporary Americana records is heavy modulation on keys and stuff.
Right.
And maybe the intensity will be dialed back a bit, or the mix will be dialed back a bit. But I'm hearing it. It's like almost like going for a faux tape kind of sound. So it's like a tape machine that's got screwy, but not doing it in a plug-in digital manner, doing it actually in an analog random manner. Really killer. Really, really killer.
Yep. Cool.
Really, really killer.
I wanted to ask you, this is so much fun and they sound great. Amp sounds great. I want to talk to you about studio stuff.
Sure.
We have one of your reverbs, stereo reverbs. Now, from experience, I know that getting into that world is like super expensive to start designing, that pro audio stuff. Like, when did you start getting into that side of things?
I got into, was in bands forever, so I've obviously made a bunch of records, and I have been recording myself since I was 18. And, I started off with a 4-tracker, and then got really bad sounding digital stuff, and then slightly better. And I'm just kind of a student of audio engineering,
Right.
which means I'm not professional, but I'm always learning and I'm really interested in it. So with the reverb, I just don't like using digital reverb, especially, being a tube amp technician, listening to spring reverbs all day.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make a record that, or I want to use a reverb that sounds like a plate to the point where I was starting to build my own plate unit, and then I was like, oh, I don't have time for this. Maybe I will just.
How did you even get? How did you?
Big steel
At
plate.
what point? Yeah.
I didn't.
You did. Okay.
No, I sourced one. I was about to go driving to get it, and I was like, I'm just going to try to hook up my Tallbird reverb unit with a different tank,
Right.
and run it all wet, see what that sounds like before I do that. And I did. It's like, okay, that kind of sounds like a plate,
Right.
and so that's what spawned the Studio Tallbird, which we discontinued sadly.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. The if you don't gain stage it, there's properly, which is something you have to do with plate reverbs, pretty much all springs. There's a high noise floor. There's a very limited dynamic range in a spring reverb, and that what would happen is people would be like, "This is noisy." They'd send it to us. I'd plug it in, and be like, "This is not noisy."
That's perfect.
And it became very expensive to do the warranty thing because you have to also do education, but you're trying to take care of customers, so you don't want to be like, well, you're probably hooked it up wrong.
Yeah.
And so we just stopped doing it.
Right.
When you say gain stage, do you mean it needs a pre or it needs to be?
So, just like an amp with a master volume, you turn up the master all the way, you're going to get some hiss, probably most of the time, depending on the amp. And you have the gain down. Now, if you do the opposite, there's not as much hiss coming from the unit. That's oversimplified and probably wrong. But basically,
there's less headroom there. With the master turned down and start turning the gain up, then there's a natural limiting area.
And then you have to hit it right from the desk and all of that. And
that's the big thing. You have to hit it right from the desk, and it takes line level. And a lot of people will, the return, they'll jack it into their audio interface, and a lot of people have those gained up a little bit because you can do that. So you have to hit it exactly right for it to have enough dynamic range where noise isn't going to be an issue.
Sure.
So, and the noise is an issue because it's got spring reverb tanks in it, and those are essentially big antennas. They'll pick up anything in the air.
Yeah.
So,
which you'll know if you stack your amps together, and you've got a huge mains transformer just underneath the spring reverb tank of the head above, which I did for most of last week. Chris has got a product launch to attend to in 2 minutes' time.
Okay.
oh gosh.
Which you should do, and after that we will come back and listen to the Florist as way of conclusion of this video.
Sounds great.
Let's do a finger snap.
Okay. And we're back in the room. So we just discovered, we went rummaging through Chris's stuff. And, as we do, it's the British custom for American travelers.
What's in his bags?
And we found one of these Surfs Up spring reverbs that is designed for this Beach Boys thing. Just happened to have it in his bag. So here it is. Check it out. So it's a spring reverb, dual spring reverb, and optical tremolo.
With tubes.
With all
tubes,
tube
all
driven.
tubes.
So at the moment, we've got it just going into the front end of the non-reverb side of the deluxe reverb.
Yeah.
So without
You told the story of this before, did you? That you're building it for the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
Good. I just can't. It was a long time ago now, so I. And it was launched at Abbey Road, and the reason you went off at 5 was to see the launch go live.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Here we go. So it's almost like we planned it, but I promise we didn't. Right. Go for it, Daniel. silly Billy.
What an astonishing sound.
Just, we've said it so many times, nothing. There is not a digital simulation in the world that sounds anything like a proper spring, and nothing that sounds like that.
So you got 2 trays in there, is that right? And you can blend between them.
Mm-hmm.
One's very drippy.
Yeah.
The other one's less drippy.
Yeah, one's long, 2-spring, like, the Fender stuff, and the other is short and 3-spring, so it's more kind of diffuse hall sound.
Dan is a fan of the short tank, aren't you? You
I
really
love
love
the
it.
short tank.
And so by mixing the 2, you get that
Yeah,
That's wild.
properly killer. And just in case you weren't following, the Surf's Up reverb and tremolo unit was hitting the deluxe reverb in its non-reverb and vibrato channel. Dan did explain that, sorry. I then, partway through, turned on the bell ringer. I am going to learn the name of the amp before the end of the video, Chris, I'm sorry. And then I was assuming that that channel of the deluxe is a different phase from the other channel of the deluxe, so we just flipped the phase, so hopefully you would have heard it in or out of phase. I'm pretty sure that was correct phase,
was
wasn't
correct.
it?
You did well.
When we got there, so you were hearing kind of wet dry with the Surf's Up in one amp, flipping that one.
And again, of course, it wouldn't be TPS if we didn't show you something that you couldn't buy. Because no doubt these are sold out in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Man alive, what a sound.
Okay, we'll go back to where we started with the amps, and then maybe we'll talk about the Florist, which is new. There's no release date yet, but we're thinking of later in the year.
Yeah, this summer.
Yeah, okay.
I think we've promised.
So we also have a saying on TPS, never knowingly first. But, we may
This
be
could
somewhere.
be the moment.
This could be the moment where we break that with the Florist. Florist. This is... please explain it, because I've never heard anything like it.
Well, okay, so this is a collaboration with Non-Human Audio, who I met earlier this year, or December last year, and Non-Human Audio makes a pedal that is getting a lot of traction called the Slow Walrus pedal, and it's 2-knob or 3-knob, and what it does is, which really piqued my interest about it, was it's like a modulated slapback. So it's a delay, very short delay, but that delay time is tied to the envelope. You know, you hit a transient, and it changes the delay time. And what it sounds like is pitching a whammy bar down.
When you played it on the intro, that was exactly what I thought. It sounds like you're bending into course. Sorry, just as a quick tangent, one thing we haven't mentioned in this video, which we absolutely must.
Oh, yes, of course.
Given that Chris mentioned collaborations, you will notice the name on the back of the
Preamp Mark II.
The TomatoTone.
TomatoTone. Come on.
And it's I think we've featured it too many times and not mentioned you, Chris. So back to the collaboration. Anyway, you should just mention that.
And that pedal's based on this puppy.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was like, that's really cool. How does it work? And he kind of explained it to me. I was like, I think there might be a better way to get that effect and a more kind of usable, thing, because it's kind of, the way he did it is kind of miraculous. I mean, fantastic sounding pedal. He has crazy ears and can recognize cool stuff. But I was like, do you mind if I help you out with it? And he was like, sure. And so he sent me a circuit board of the thing that he had designed, and I think I got to it about a month later, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try to get this effect the way I would do it, but try to get the same effect. So I did. I kind of stuck some stuff together. I used like a compressor detector type circuit to do the envelope, and sent him the schematic, and he put it together. He's like, oh, this sounds different, but really cool. And It's like, well, use it or not, free design work. He's like, why don't we build it? Like, why don't we do a collab? And it's like, yeah, that sounds great, because I freaking love the effect.
Yeah.
I really am stoked on how this turned out. So I took his basic idea, which only has one delay line. I stuck a second delay line in it, and I made you can actually turn the dry all the way down.
Right.
So all these knobs, as they are right now, straight up and down is unity gain. So this is the dry, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
This is the volumes for the two delay lines. And then this is the intensity of effect. And each side has a different detector circuit. So they're not going to do the same thing. So it's a pretty strange way to get a chorus that does a lot of other things. The effect is, it kind of sounds like a chorus, but it kind of also depends on how you set it up and play it.
Right.
And it can do some like flangery type sounds. It can just get real weird too. I'm sure there are ways to get this effect using, 80s rock gear, but I had never run across it. And it made me really excited. And credit to Dave at Non-Human Audio for recognizing, this is a really cool thing that people might like.
Awesome. Awesome.
Perhaps you could, we'll turn you on.
Uh-oh. So it can do kind of a tri-chorus thing, because it has two different delay lines and the dry. So with that, I dialed the intensity back a little bit. So that's one of the things. You can actually dial the dry out, and so it's just the two delay lines. So this is the effect that sold me on it. This is kind of what the slow Walrus does. So this is just one delay line and the dry. Then the other
Can you,
one,
sorry,
yeah.
play that again. I just want to hear that wet dry into just play that for us now.
No idea what I played. Okay, I'll play some.
That is wild.
What does the ghosts do?
Oh, so
There's actual ghosts.
of course I'm gonna get extra weird with it, especially if I have another space for another foot switch, because this is like the same form factor as the delay. It's like, well, what could I put there? So I introduced feedback on the end of on the very edge of oscillation on both sides, so it doesn't totally run away, but it kind of creates like a modulated reverb effect. And it sounds extra good with everything going.
Oh, that is wild.
Well, obviously we've got to hear it with loads of delay and fuzz now, haven't we? That would be the right thing to
Of
do
course.
next. Awesome.
That's really great.
I can totally hear that layered in a record somewhere. Wicked, man. Wicked.
Thank you so much.
Wicked, wicked, wicked. Oh, well, maybe Dan and I will have a further play with that in due course. Oh, nearly fell off a chair. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, this has been really great.
Yeah,
It's been really great to meet you and, get a glimpse behind the curtain, as it were.
Really, really cool. Really cool. And also, Bell Ringer, we've been having a lot of fun with that today. We are a little bit green to Chris's amps. We heard Nathan Jr. in the hands of John Smith.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's the road we can go down as well. Just haven't heard many, but seen him on lots and lots of stages.
Yeah.
Loving that today.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think getting an EL34 amp to chime and sound fat clean is it's not often I've heard it, but when I've heard it, I've absolutely loved it. And
Were we listening to
nailed
EL34s then?
EL34s.
Mm-hmm.
Get out of town.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, yeah.
It just chimes in a specific way. There's no bloat there, but it's big, and
And the reverb
the
is
reverb is
killer.
yeah.
Well,
Man.
it's a short tank, which you like.
Love the short take.
I like that too.
Yeah,
There we
man.
go. There we go. There we go. We could keep talking all day. Thank you
Yeah.
for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're
This
so
has been
welcome.
really
Bud.
fun.
You're so welcome. Bud.
Okay, please subscribe. We mentioned that earlier. Please go to thatpedalshowstore.com and check out our wares. That's how we fund this show. And we want to hit Benson.com,
BensonAmps.com.
BensonAmps.com to check out everything that's going on with Chris and Benson.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much for watching. Thank you, Chris. Take it easy. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.